The denied seat. The massive conference hall stretched out like a metallic cathedral, its curved walls reaching toward a dome of pure starlight. Station Nexus 7 hung in the void between star systems, neutral territory where the galaxy's most powerful civilizations could meet without fear of territorial disputes. Today, representatives from 53 different species had gathered for the most important vote in galactic history. Sergeant Marcus Thompson stepped through the airlock, his worn military uniform a stark contrast to the gleaming ceremonial robes and advanced armor worn by the other delegates. The human military advisor had traveled 6 months through hyperspace to reach this moment, carrying the hopes of 8 billion souls back on Earth. His boots clicked against the polished floor as he made his way toward the registration desk. The hall buzzed with conversations in dozens of languages. Towering Zelthani warriors, their blue-scaled skin gleaming under the artificial lights, spoke in deep rumbling voices about conquest and expansion. The crystalline Vex collective representatives hummed in harmonic frequencies that made the air itself vibrate. Near the center of the hall, the insectoid Cytherian delegation moved in perfect synchronization, their compound eyes reflecting the light like tiny mirrors. Marcus approached the registration terminal where a Cytherian protocol officer waited. The alien stood nearly 7 feet tall, its 4 arms working simultaneously on different data tablets. When it looked up, all 6 of its eyes focused on Marcus with obvious disdain. "Name and species designation," the Cytherian commanded, its voice carrying the mechanical precision typical of its kind. "Sergeant Marcus Thompson, representing Earth and the Terran Federation," Marcus replied, keeping his voice steady and professional. The alien's mandibles clicked in what Marcus had learned was equivalent to a dismissive snort. "Ah yes, the humans. There seems to be an issue with your seating assignment." Marcus felt a cold knot form in his stomach. "What kind of issue?" "The Galactic Council has determined that your species lacks the necessary qualifications for a full delegate seat. You will be assigned to the observer section." The Cytherian gestured toward the back of the hall where a small standing area was roped off from the main floor. "That's impossible," Marcus said, his military training keeping his anger in check. Earth was specifically invited to participate in the Galactic Defense Pact discussions. We were promised full representation. The protocol officer's compound eyes glittered with amusement. "Promises can be reconsidered. Your species has contributed nothing of significance to galactic civilization. You barely qualify as a spacefaring race. The observer section is more than generous." Other delegates began to notice the commotion. A group of Zelthani warriors approached, their ceremonial weapons clanking with each step. The largest among them, wearing the golden armor of a fleet commander, spoke in accented galactic standard. "Is there a problem with the human representative?" Commander Vexstar asked, his reptilian features twisted in what might have been amusement. The Cytherian protocol officer straightened with obvious pride. "No problem, Commander. Simply placing species where they belong according to their contributions to galactic society." Vexstar's laugh was like grinding stone. "Contributions? What could these hairless mammals possibly contribute? Their largest warship would fit inside our shuttle bay." More aliens began to gather, drawn by the spectacle. A Vex collective speaker, its crystalline form pulsing with different colors, added its harmonic voice to the conversation. "Our analysis indicates human technology is approximately 2,847 years behind galactic standard. Their weapons are chemical-based projectiles, quite primitive." Marcus stood perfectly still as the insults flowed around him. His weathered face showed no emotion, but his gray eyes missed nothing. 23 years of military service had taught him when to fight and when to wait. This was a time for waiting. The protocol officer seemed to enjoy the growing audience. "Perhaps we should explain to our observer why his species was not deemed worthy of a proper seat." A new voice joined the conversation, this one belonging to an elegant Alteran diplomat whose silver skin seemed to shimmer with inner light. "The humans have been in space for less than a century. My people have been exploring the galaxy for over 10,000 years. We have seen countless young species make the same mistakes. Their military record is particularly unimpressive," added a hegemony representative, its mechanical voice crackling through translation devices. Analysis of their conflicts shows inefficient tactics and wasteful casualties. They fight with emotion rather than logic. Marcus watched as more delegates joined the growing circle around him. Each species seemed eager to demonstrate their superiority over humanity. The Catherian protocol officer appeared delighted by the attention, its mandibles clicking rapidly as it gestured toward Marcus. "Observe the primitive uniform," it announced. "Notice the crude fabric construction and the archaic rank insignia. Their entire military structure is based on obsolete concepts from their pre-space era." The crowd of aliens began to murmur among themselves, some making sounds that Marcus recognized as laughter in their respective languages. A few pulled out recording devices, as if documenting this moment for posterity. Commander Vexstar stepped closer to Marcus, towering over the human by nearly 3 feet. "Tell me, little human, what battles has your species won? What enemies have you defeated? What territories have you conquered?" Marcus looked up at the massive Zelthani warrior without flinching. "We've won the battles that mattered, Commander." This response provoked more laughter from the assembled aliens. The Vex collective speaker pulsed with colors that Marcus had learned indicated amusement. "Please enlighten us about these victories that mattered to such a primitive species." The protocol officer seized the opportunity to further humiliate the human representative. "Perhaps you could tell us about your greatest military achievement. I'm sure it would be educational." Marcus remained silent, studying the faces around him. These beings commanded fleets that could destroy planets. They possessed technology that seemed like magic to human eyes. Their civilizations had existed since before humans had discovered fire. Yet as he looked at them, Marcus began to notice something troubling. Their eyes held no warmth. Their expressions showed no compassion. These ancient, powerful beings had forgotten something important in their rise to galactic dominance. They had forgotten what it meant to sacrifice for others who couldn't defend themselves. The protocol officer, interpreting Marcus's silence as admission of defeat, gestured grandly toward the observer section. "Please take your assigned position, human. The real delegates have important business to discuss." As Marcus walked toward the back of the hall, he could hear the aliens continuing their conversation about humanity's inadequacy. Their voices followed him across the polished floor, each word designed to remind him of his species' supposed inferiority. The observer section was cramped and poorly positioned. From here, Marcus would barely be able to see the main proceedings, much less participate. A few other beings occupied the space: minor diplomatic staff, security personnel, and maintenance workers. None of them were meant to have a voice in galactic affairs. Marcus took his position and watched as the real delegates filed toward their assigned seats. The arrangement of the hall itself spoke volumes about galactic hierarchy. The oldest, most powerful species occupied the central positions, while newer or weaker civilizations were relegated to the outer rings. Earth, apparently, didn't even qualify for the outer rings. As the session began, Marcus listened to the opening ceremonies with growing frustration. Speaker after speaker rose to discuss the formation of the new Galactic Defense Pact. Each species outlined their contributions to galactic security, their technological advantages, and their military capabilities. The Zelthani presented holographic displays of their massive battle fleets. Ships the size of human cities bristled with weapons that could crack continents. Their presentation received enthusiastic approval from the other delegates. The Vex Collective demonstrated their predictive algorithms, showing how their crystalline intelligence could anticipate and counter any possible threat. Their mathematical precision drew appreciative harmonics from throughout the hall. One by one, each species proved their worth through displays of power, technology, or ancient wisdom. The message was clear. The galaxy's defense would be entrusted only to those who had earned their place through strength and achievement. As the presentations continued, Marcus felt something building in his chest. Not anger, He had learned to control that emotion long ago. This was something deeper, a sense of injustice that cut to the core of everything he believed about duty and honor. These aliens spoke of defense and security while dismissing the very species that had already proven its willingness to defend others. They talked about contribution and worthiness while ignoring sacrifices that had already been made. Most insulting of all, they assumed that technological superiority was the only measure of a civilization's value. Marcus checked his chronometer. 3 hours had passed since the session began, and not one speaker had mentioned the Proxima crisis. Not one of these advanced civilizations had acknowledged what had happened just 3 months ago in a distant star system that most of them probably couldn't even locate on their star charts. But Marcus remembered. He remembered every detail of those desperate days when the impossible had become necessary and the unthinkable had become reality. The response that changed everything. The session was entering its 4th hour when the Cytherian ambassador rose to address the assembled delegates. Ambassador Zelthak commanded respect throughout the galaxy, his species having mastered interstellar travel when most civilizations were still discovering agriculture. His words carried the weight of millennia of galactic politics. Fellow delegates, Zelthak began, his compound eyes scanning the hall. We gather today to form the most comprehensive defense alliance our galaxy has ever known. Only species that have proven their worth through contribution and sacrifice deserve membership in this sacred compact. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the hall. Marcus watched from his position in the observer section as alien heads nodded in approval. However, the ambassador continued, certain newer species have requested inclusion despite their obvious inadequacies. Species that lack both the technological sophistication and the moral courage necessary for galactic defense. Marcus felt every eye in the hall turn toward the human section, even though he was barely visible from most delegate positions. The insult was clear and intentional. Commander Vexstar stood up, his golden armor gleaming. If I may, Ambassador Zelthak, the Zelthani Empire questions whether primitive species like the humans even understand the concept of true warfare. Their conflicts are small, localized affairs that barely qualify as skirmishes by galactic standards. The Vex collective speaker pulsed with agreement. Our analysis confirms that human military doctrine is based on crude emotional responses rather than logical strategic thinking. They lack the computational capacity for truly effective warfare. More voices joined the chorus. The Alteran diplomats spoke of humanity's short lifespan making them unsuitable for long-term strategic planning. A hegemony representative calculated that human industrial capacity could not support meaningful military production on a galactic scale. Each comment was like a calculated insult designed to demonstrate humanity's unworthiness for membership in the galactic community. Marcus listened to it all, his expression unchanging, his posture military straight, despite the cramped conditions of the observer section. Then Ambassador Zelthak delivered what was clearly meant to be the final blow. Perhaps most concerning is the human tendency toward what they call heroic sacrifice, essentially throwing away military assets for emotional rather than strategic reasons. Such irrational behavior makes them unreliable allies in any serious conflict. The hall erupted in what Marcus could only describe as polite alien laughter. Representatives from dozens of species expressed their amusement at humanity's supposed character flaws. The sound echoed off the metallic walls like a chorus of mockery. That was when Marcus decided he had heard enough. Without asking permission or following protocol, Sergeant Marcus Thompson stepped out of the observer section and began walking toward the center of the hall. His boots echoed loudly in the sudden silence that fell over the chamber. Security drones began to move from their positions along the walls, but something in Marcus's bearing made them hesitate. "I've been standing back there for 4 hours," Marcus announced, his voice carrying clearly through the hall's acoustic design. 4 hours listening to you debate humanity's worth. 4 hours of insults and dismissals and calculations about our inadequacy. Ambassador Zelthak's mandibles clicked with irritation. The human observer was not granted permission to address this assembly. Marcus reached the center of the hall and turned slowly, making eye contact with delegates throughout the chamber. I don't need your permission to tell you the truth. The security drones moved closer, but Commander Vextar raised a scaled hand to stop them. Let the human speak, he rumbled with amusement. This should be entertaining. Marcus nodded toward the Zelthani commander. Thank you, Commander. I want to tell you all about the Proxima crisis. The hall fell completely silent. Several delegates exchanged glances, and Marcus could see recognition dawning in some of their eyes. 3 months ago, Marcus continued, every species in this room received the same distress signal. Emergency transmissions from the Proxima Centauri system. A rogue AI fleet was systematically destroying every inhabited world in the system. The calls for help were broadcast on all frequencies, in every galactic language. Ambassador Zelthak's compound eyes focused intently on Marcus. That situation was analyzed by our strategic command. The risk-to-benefit ratio was deemed unacceptable. Unacceptable, Marcus repeated. 2.3 million sentient beings were about to die, and you calculated that saving them was unacceptable. The Vex collective speaker pulsed with defensive colors. The AI fleet consisted of 847 autonomous warships equipped with weapons capable of planetary destruction. Any rescue attempt would have resulted in the loss of our own fleets with minimal probability of success. Marcus turned toward the crystalline being. Your analysis was correct. The odds were impossible. 200 dreadnoughts against any force we could assemble. Weapons that could crack planets. Shields that could deflect any known attack. By every logical calculation, a rescue mission was suicide. He paused, letting his words sink in before continuing. So naturally, humanity was the only species that tried. The silence in the hall was deafening. Marcus could see alien expressions changing as they began to understand what he was telling them. Captain Sarah Chen of the Terran vessel Determination received those distress calls just like everyone else, Marcus said. She ran the same calculations your computers did. She knew the odds were impossible. She knew it was suicide. Marcus began walking slowly around the center of the hall, addressing different sections of delegates as he spoke. Captain Chen assembled a fleet of 40 human ships. 40 ships against 200 dreadnoughts, our primitive vessels with their crude weapons and obsolete tactics. Every military computer in the galaxy would have laughed at the impossibility of it. Commander Vextar leaned forward in his seat. What happened to this fleet? Marcus turned to face the Zelthani warrior directly. They saved every single life in the Proxima system. The impact of his words rippled through the hall like a physical force. Delegates began consulting their data tablets, calling up records of the Proxima crisis that they had apparently dismissed as unimportant. The human fleet used tactics that your advanced military minds couldn't comprehend, Marcus continued. They didn't try to outgun the AI ships. They knew that was impossible. Instead, they did something that no logical computer could predict. He paused, watching as more aliens accessed their records and began to understand the scope of what he was describing. Captain Chen ordered her ships to position themselves between the AI fleet and the civilian evacuation transports. 40 human vessels formed a defensive line and told 2.3 million beings to run while there was still time. The Alteran diplomat's silver skin had lost its shimmer. The evacuation was successful. Every civilian transport made it to safety, Marcus confirmed. Every single one. 2.3 million beings from 12 different species, including 400,000 Catherians, 150,000 Zelthani, and 50,000 members of the Vex Collective. Ambassador Zelthak's compound eyes widened as he checked his own records. Around the hall, other delegates were making similar discoveries. Marcus continued his story, his voice never wavering despite the emotion behind his words. The human fleet held that line for 18 hours. 18 hours of impossible odds and certain death. They used every trick in the book. Asteroid fields for cover, nuclear mines, coordinated attacks that confused the AI's logical programming patterns. How many human ships survived? Commander Vextar asked quietly. 17, Marcus replied. We lost 23 ships, including Captain Chen's flagship. But those 2.3 million civilians, your people, are alive today because 40 humans decided that some things are worth dying for. The hall remained silent as the full impact of the revelation settled over the assembled delegates. Species that had spent hours mocking humanity's primitive nature were now confronting the fact that their own citizens owed their lives to human sacrifice. Marcus turned to address Ambassador Zelfak directly. You asked what humanity brings to this galaxy. You want to know what qualifies us for membership in your defense alliance. The Catherian ambassador's mandibles had stopped clicking. His voice was much quieter when he spoke. Please, enlighten us. Marcus stood straighter, every inch the soldier he had been for 23 years. We bring something that you've forgotten in all your calculations and strategic analyses and logical evaluations. We bring the willingness to act when action seems impossible. We bring the courage to stand up when everyone else sits down. He gestured toward the elaborate seating arrangement that had excluded humanity from meaningful participation. You measure worth by technology and territory and the age of civilizations. But worth isn't measured by how long you've existed or how many planets you control. Marcus's voice grew stronger, carrying the conviction of someone who had seen the best and worst that sentient beings could offer. Worth is measured by what you do when others need help. Worth is measured by whether you answer the call when the impossible becomes necessary. The silence stretched on as delegates throughout the hall processed what they had heard. Some began accessing more detailed records of the Proxima crisis, discovering the extent of the human sacrifice they had completely ignored. Finally, Commander Vextar rose from his seat. The massive Zelthani warrior walked down to the center of the hall until he stood face to face with Marcus. For a long moment, the two warriors studied each other, one representing the galaxy's most powerful military force, the other representing a species that had just proven its worth through sacrifice rather than strength. Sergeant Marcus Thompson, Commander Vextar said formally, the Zelthani Empire owes a debt to humanity that cannot be calculated or repaid. Our colonies in the Proxima system exist because of human courage. He stepped aside and gestured toward the central seating area reserved for the most honored delegates. Would you please take your proper place in these proceedings? Ambassador Zelfak also rose, his compound eyes reflecting the lights differently now. The Catherian collective seconds this motion. Humanity has more than earned its place in the Galactic Defense Pact. One by one, representatives from every species in the hall stood and voiced their agreement. The Vex collective pulsed with colors Marcus had never seen before. What he would later learn represented profound respect and gratitude. As Marcus walked toward the center of the hall, he passed the empty observer section, where he had been forced to stand for 4 hours. The contrast was not lost on him, or on any of the alien delegates who watched his progress. When he finally took his seat among the galaxy's most powerful beings, Marcus looked around at faces that now showed respect instead of mockery. These ancient civilizations had learned something important today about the difference between strength and power, between intelligence and wisdom. The vote to include humanity in the Galactic Defense Pact was unanimous. But more than that, Marcus was offered a position on the High Command, the first human ever to be given such responsibility. As the session concluded and delegates began filing out of the hall, many stopped to speak with Marcus personally. They wanted to learn more about human tactics, human courage, and the kind of thinking that could turn impossible odds into victory. Ambassador Zelfak was among the last to approach. Sergeant Thompson, he said, his voice carrying genuine respect, I must ask, how did your people know they could win against such odds? Marcus looked up at the towering alien diplomat and smiled for the first time since arriving at the station. We didn't know we could win, Ambassador. We just knew we had to try. As the lights dimmed in the Great Hall, and the stars became visible through the transparent dome above, Marcus reflected on how much had changed in a single day. Humanity had not only earned its place among the galaxy's defenders, It had reminded them all what true strength really meant. The flag of Earth now flew alongside the banners of civilizations that were ancient when humans first looked up at the stars. But more importantly, the galaxy had remembered something it had almost lost in its pursuit of power and technology. Sometimes the greatest victories come not from superior weapons or advanced tactics, but from the simple willingness to stand up when everyone else sits down.